Hi, I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is Start Here. Today I want to talk about being shut down by certain details that we tend to obsess about that begin to control our life and attract all of our focus so that we can't think about anything else. We can become so hyper-focused on one thing, on one degree, that we miss the other 359 degrees. We miss the rest of the picture, we miss the rest of the world, we miss the rest of our lives because we're focused so intently on one thing. For instance, we can become totally obsessed over one tiny little detail on somebody's face. Like this one right here. That little dab of sunscreen that I put on there to get your attention. Did it work? Did it get your attention? Were you focused on that? Like, what is that? Is that a booger? What's going on there? I made another video where there was a tiny little cat hair on my chin. And people were commenting that that is all they could focus on. I can't stop looking at that cat hair. But it's tiny. It's a little cat hair. What does that have to do with the information? What does that have to do with the world? What does this little dab of sunscreen have to do with anything? Nothing. There's no bearing on what I'm saying or who I'm being or what I'm up to, what I've accomplished, what I'm moving towards. It's totally insignificant, but yet our minds hyper-focus on little details that seem out of place. And this is part of our survival wiring from way back in the day, where if something changed, we better pay attention because there could be a threat. If things are the same, the brain is like, okay, nothing new here, just chill out, relax, whatever. But oops, something changed. What is it? What was that noise? Was that a blade of straw being broken? Was there an animal creeping up on us slowly? I heard a tiny little noise. I better pay attention. Oop, I saw some grass waving over there. Maybe there's an animal waiting. Maybe that's a lion waiting to jump us. I better notice those small details. Because a lion just doesn't stroll up on you. It doesn't just walk into the camp. No, it waits. It stalks you. You don't even know it's coming. Unless you're paying attention to the tiniest differences in sound and vision and smell. So our brains are wired for these tiny, tiny changes. And this is great if you're living out on the savannah way back in the day, but in modern life, it can really throw us off because we tend to hyper-focus on things that are totally insignificant. They represent change, so our brain's like, ooh, change, change, change. But is it a significant change? No, nobody's going to die because you have a cat hair on your chin. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain's like, this is different, and I don't like it. This is one of the reasons that people have such a hard time getting started, because of one little detail, one little cat hair that they've turned into a catastrophe. Now, in reality, it's not a catastrophe, but our brain keeps telling us, because of our hyperfocus, that it is. We keep blowing it up and adding more and more and more story to it. We flesh that story out. We start with a tiny hair and we keep adding flesh to it until it's this giant hulking monster. But that's all just in our head. The reality is it's still a cat hair. It still can be blown away with a light breath. And I'm not going to say that's all you need to do. Just simply blow away your problems. Blow away that one thing that you can't deal with, that one little tiny obstacle that's just killing you. Can't just blow it away because your brain thinks it's real. So what can you do in these situations? One, you can ask for help. If it's a tiny detail, if it's a tiny thing, chances are that a friend or family member or spouse or child is not going to have a problem dealing with it because it's tiny. It really takes no energy. And if they haven't turned it into a giant catastrophe yet, all they have to do is go. Maybe there's an email you need to send, and you've turned it into this monstrous thing, but it's like 8 words. I need to type 8 words. But the whole world's going to fall apart. Well, invite somebody over and say, could you type 8 words for me? No big deal. Like 8, really? That's what you need help with? 8 words? Yes. Because it's not just 8 words for me. It's 800,000 words. So number 1, you can ask for help. Number 2, you can do what I often do, which is reward yourself before doing something. You see, when we're in that fear mode, when we're in that hyper-focused mode, when we're obsessing over something, it's because our fight or flight system in the brain has been engaged, our limbic system. And the challenging thing about this is when our limbic system is engaged, we have a reduced blood flow up here to the prefrontal cortex. That's our rational brain. That's our cognitive mind. That's where our intelligence comes from. That part of the brain allows us to look at things and make good decisions based on deep thinking. But when you're in a fight or flight situation, you don't have time for deep thinking. So the brain's like, we need to turn off the modern part and send all the blood and energy to the primitive part because we need to make some primitive decisions. Fight or flight or freeze. That's the third one, which some people do. They get into a situation and they just freeze and get eaten or killed. So this part of the brain, the smart part, it doesn't even work because it's been shut off, because we don't need it, because we don't have time to make slow, deliberative decisions that we consider all the options. There's no time for that. You got to move, dude. You got to act or die. So how do you re-engage your prefrontal cortex and get your cognitive mind back in the game so you can see the bigger picture? So you can look at the cat hair and say, wait a minute, that's just a cat hair. What am I freaking out about? How do you re-engage that part of your brain? By producing dopamine. Dopamine is the neurochemical of reward. Whenever we do something that our brain perceives as beneficial for us, it wants us to continue that behavior, so it rewards us. It releases dopamine, which makes us feel good. It's that feeling you get when you accomplish something, when you achieve a goal, when you meet an expectation, when you get a scratch-off ticket and you win, that good feeling like, yes, that's dopamine. When your favorite football team or soccer team scores a goal, you're like, yeah, that's dopamine. It's a good feeling. It's a rush. This is one of the reasons that people do cocaine, because it causes the brain to release a lot of dopamine. And people are like, I'm superhuman, yes. That's dopamine. And when you produce dopamine, there's a neurochemical change all throughout your brain. The fight or flight system gets turned down, your prefrontal cortex gets turned up, and it's like waking up. You're like, ooh, I feel good now. All right, let me look at these things in a different light now. Wait a minute, why am I obsessed over a cat hair? That's no big deal. So by producing dopamine, you can see things more clearly. You can act more rationally. So how do you do that? How do you produce dopamine when you're about to deal with something that's totally freaking you out? Do something else first that's rewarding. A small task. A tiny little goal that you can complete in 5 minutes. Pick something up, put something away. Do something that makes you feel good. Some people eat chocolate. That produces dopamine in the brain. Little piece of chocolate, dopamine, yeah, all right. Now what am I dealing with? Oh, it's a cat hair, okay. There are all kinds of things that you can do to reward yourself. Little tiny rewards that suddenly change your brain chemistry and you're not freaked out anymore. You're not panicked. You're not obsessed. You're a little bit more relaxed. You're feeling good and you're like, okay, now I've got the energy and the clarity to deal with that cat hair, because after all, it's just a cat hair. It's just an 8-word email. It's not the end of the world. Now, for a big problem that's legitimately big and has lots of steps and requires massive amount of resources, that's different. But when we're stumbled by a tiny, tiny little thing that we have turned into this massive brainstorm of doubt and fear and insecurity and inability to move, well, then a little bit of dopamine is going to help you move through that. So try that out, see how it works, and I hope it helps you in some way. Okay? I love you. Bye.